We're going to put the record button on tonight because we're going to tape this conversation with Biff Zeppe, and you will find it.
That's so it can be played later in court.
That's right. You know how it works. Listen, I'm from the FBI. I like to go into the White House with my own tape recorder.
Listen, I'm with you on that one.
Ladies and gentlemen, Biff Zeppe with us tonight from SHR Media's BZ's Berserk Bobcat Saloon. You can find him on Twitter at BZeppe. You can also find him on Facebook at Biff Zeppe. Or just go to shrmedia.com and you'll find him there. The New American Community Police Force, ANTIFA, Black Lives Matter, Nation of Islam, and the new Black Panthers. I am so glad that you all tuned in tonight because it's going to be a royal conversation with a man who understands law enforcement like very few people could. Biff Zeppe, is a great honor and privilege always to have you on the air with us.
My penance is to apologize for calling in early.
Hey, no, this is absolutely perfect. Because, quite frankly, just finished a conversation with Thomas Special, who's running for U.S. Senate in Virginia, and he mentioned that this is a very good time for Americans to make prudent decisions, not haphazardly because we're reacting to emotions. And you, my friend, understand law enforcement like very few other people in conservative news, talk, and radio can ever talk of. I got to ask you, what would you have to do to actually fill out an application form to join Antifa or Black Lives Matter or New Black Panther or whomever would be the new private force for community policing?
No, I think you've got it reversed.
Oh.
I'm afraid to say.
Okay.
Oh, you want me to talk now?
Yes, I do. Yes, I do. Go right ahead.
Oh. This is a talk show. Oh, that's right. I keep forgetting. Okay, I think it's going to be reversed. You know, I have to tell you, I was of like 75 different minds about calling you tonight because I'm going to have to straighten my stuff out for my show tomorrow night, and then I'm on another guy's show Wednesday night, and then I got to go back and do mine Thursday night. So I really am of two minds about all of this. My first mind is for all. My first thoughts are, my thoughts are all over the place.
Yeah.
And it's so insane. It's as if I truly don't know where to start. And it was a tagline. For a while, it was a tagline. Like, okay, first we had Australia on fire. That was a lot of fun. And then, then we got a big old pandemic. Then we closed the economy and killed the United States economy and the economy of the world. And then we had the murder hornets. Wasn't that funny? That was a pretty good tagline.
Yeah, good one.
And then we had the tagline of, what's going to be next? You know, like maybe a comet or an asteroid from somewhere that, turn us back a couple of million years, and dinosaurs will rule the land once again. That was kind of an amusing tagline. And then the tagline became, I think we've seen just about everything, but one thing of which we're certain is it hasn't stopped getting stupid. But I do have to admit, I did not foresee it getting this stupid. So my first, and I don't mean to offend you, but I think a lot of this has to do with regionality. Mm-hmm. One of my first impressions, or my first thoughts, and I'm responding to this defund the police phrase. One of my first thoughts is I live in a leftist state, and I live in a leftist town. Well, my wife has a house in a leftist town.
Mm-hmm.
And what a lot of people don't know about me, when folks say, you have no idea about the urban poor experience. My house, I have a house,
Yeah.
is up in the Sierra Nevada mountains.
Mm-hmm.
I'm about 4,000 feet. I'm at the snow level. And I've been there since 1993. It's a 2,000 square foot cabin. And it's in the middle of trees and chirping birds. And it's also in a wildfire path. And it's also in an area where when the wind blows over 1 knot, PG&E cuts off your electricity. But that's my house up there. I've been in my wife's house since 2004. And what that means is, and I've written about it but not really talked about it much, is that she lives in what you would essentially say, for lack of a better phrase, ghetto central.
Mm-hmm.
I'm in the local chapter of VFW. Actually, it's the OFW. The VFW is very few whites.
Mm-hmm.
Actually, my neighborhood is the OFW, where I am the only fucking white. So I have an idea of what it is like because my wife has had this house for quite some time. If you want to talk about urban blight, well, I live in the middle of it. That's where my wife has had a house for quite some time. Very few homeowners around here. Most people are rentals. Most people don't have 100% jobs. The homes change around here with rapidity. People will come in, trash a home, leave it. But the people that are allegedly poor around here are actually driving better cars than I do. And they've got 100-inch or 65-inch TVs, which I don't. However, that's the state of the urban or suburban poor today. So what I'm about to say, I needed to say that in order to say this.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe it really is time for an experiment. And I've been all to all the cop blogs and all the various cops and whatnot, and there are so many reactions to this in law enforcement. One is a great disappointment. And for just a microsecond, I thought, yeah, they're probably kidding on this, defund the police, until an actual minute or two later, especially today, I realized, oh, they're really very serious about this. Because Garcetti in LA, the mayor there, has already said $150 million to be pulled from LAPD. And then I'm going to ask you about DC in a second because I don't know about that.
Yeah.
NYPD, de Blasio has said that he's going to pull $1 billion from the NYPD. One thing we do know is that all the 200 to 400 police vehicles lost across this nation because of budgets, those are not coming back. So if folks, you think that you're going to have a really great response in the areas blighted by protesting and riots, that's not going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
And now, like a lot of my prior opinions, I find myself being dragged kicking and screaming into the venue of, okay, if this is what you really want, then A, Minneapolis, you first, and B, I'm not just going to stay out of your way, I'm going to be an active advocate for this.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to actively advocate for people that live in urban areas, or even suburban areas like mine. Sacramento is kind of nuts, but it's not quite so nuts that I think they're going to do that. Now, I haven't heard them talking about defunding the police in Sacramento.
Yeah.
Put up or shut up. Now, I know that's going to affect a lot of people in those immediate areas, and the reason that I had to qualify and say that I don't want to offend you
Mm-hmm.
is that I'm not in LA, so I don't care what the hell happens to LA. I'm not in Chicago, so I don't care what happens to Chicago, or New York, or DC. All you people / Ken McClinton and 2 other guys that I know accepted in that. I honestly don't care what happens in those areas. So let's make a big urban experiment, but let's first start with Minneapolis, because they were the one that got this tsunami going.
Mm-hmm.
And let's begin this experiment and see how it works out. The funny thing is, after the 65 riots, America didn't learn anything, including blacks. Then there were the 68 King riots in Baltimore. America didn't learn anything. You can go to Baltimore, and I'm sure you've probably been there yourself, Ken,
Yeah.
where you can see row after row after row of burned out homes still in the city of Baltimore, where some places look like beautiful downtown Stalingrad from World War II.
Exactly.
We didn't learn anything from that. There are still areas of Los Angeles in 1992 that are the same, similar to Baltimore. Ferguson, essentially the same thing. Now it's going to be Minneapolis and portions of New York, all the venues where buildings were set on fire. These are all leftist enclaves, which brings me to I really don't care what happens to those leftist enclaves. I have the luxury of saying that, semi-luxury, because I'm still not bathing in the finery of Central, because I see how it goes.
Yeah.
I've been living here watching how it goes all this time. But if you really want to make an experiment, then my thoughts to everyone demand, not just suggesting an experiment like this, but demanding an experiment like this is, okay, go ahead and do it. What we're actually discovering is that we haven't learned anything. And I've got a major question for you, Ken.
Sure.
Probably in about a couple of minutes or so.
Mm-hmm.
But we may be educated in the U.S., but I really don't think we've learned anything. We are going out of our way to incentivize rage by rewarding it. We're letting the woke child mob take control. I call them, and I've called them this for years, GOUTs, guilty overeducated white people.
Yep.
Because there's one thing that I will dare to say, because I really don't care what people think about me, which is this. BLM, if they think they're in control, they are not in control. Do you know who's in control again? White people.
Yeah.
GOUTs. The guilty overeducated white people are in control. ANTIFA is in control. The woke child mob is in control. All of them white. Antifa going into all of these urban settings, starting the chain, throwing the first Molotov. They don't live in those neighborhoods, and they don't care about those neighborhoods. All they care about is the chaos and the potential power that leftists are going to gain, and the political ramifications of starting this massive wheel in motion. But if BLM thinks that it's ultimately in control of all of this, they really aren't. Like I said, if each police car burned 200 to 400 cars in the nation, that's one more car or 400 more cars that won't be responding to whatever 911 call you happen to make. And I guess, folks, you're going to have to live with it. Because of defunding, not only will those cars not be coming back, other cars will be leaving. So you can thank a BLM or an Antifa member or a GOUT individual for all of that. And the other thing that's really weird
Yeah.
Well, let's go back to Ferguson for a moment, and this is part and parcel of what we haven't learned is, oh gosh, what was it? It was 2015. That's right. Was it Ferguson 2015, Ken?
I believe it was.
Okay.
I believe it was.
Now, Baltimore lit up on fire following Ferguson. So Ferguson was the match, the focal point. But after that, it wasn't Ferguson, but it was Baltimore that ended up being one of America's deadliest big cities. And so when cops are told for years, but it started in Baltimore first, I noted. When cops are told that they over-police, then the decision they make is that they're going to begin to under-police. And this is what you're going to see now. Well, this is what you've seen for a while post-Ferguson. There are two types of policing, proactive policing and reactive policing. And for the most part, you've seen proactive policing stop. Because now police officers are thinking of 2 points. One is officer survival in terms of how am I going to handle this particular call. On this given call, this critical incident, how am I going to keep myself, my partner, and my other officers safe? That's officer safety in terms of response. Now they think in terms of career safety. That was even back then up to and include, well, not quite before these newest riots. But the reason that you were seeing murders begin to skyrocket, and it really started in Baltimore. Officers in Baltimore following Ferguson suddenly seemed to stop noticing crime.
Mm-hmm.
They saw fewer drug dealers on the streets. They encountered fewer people that had open arrest warrants. They questioned fewer people on the street. They stopped fewer cars. What was that? Spring of 2015, I think.
Yeah.
And Baltimore, that was the Freddie Gray riots. The guy that died in the back of the police van. So Baltimore had their own thing, separate from Ferguson. Is what those cops did is they put horse blinders on. And in the process of doing so, after a while, you get told as a law enforcement member that you're over policing, and then you don't want to believe it, you don't want to hear it, and then your community demands it of you, then your superiors demand it of you, then your chief demands it of you, captains, lieutenants, your sergeants demand it of you, and after a while, you decide that career survival really is going to be the most important aspect because you still got to put food on the table.
Yeah.
So, there was, what is this guy's name? Fuggle, something like that. He was a commissioner in Baltimore, and I can remember this quote. He said, in all candor, and I hope I'm getting this basic quote appropriately, officers aren't as aggressive as they once were pre-2015. That's just a fact. Well, since then, the other thing that we've noticed, and I carved on this, and it's still true, the greatest amount of crime ever in American history, because I happen to go through it, was the late 80s to the early 90s.
Yes.
Crime spiked at that time. I can remember being in robbery, and I can remember being in homicide, because all my homicide suspects were all my robbery suspects, and all my robbery suspects were all my homicide suspects. And I can tell you, quite frankly, cops now don't have a fraction of the caseload that I carried back then. That was also the massive explosion of gangs.
Yep.
And then with that,
crack.
The concomitant factor was drugs,
Mm-hmm.
etc. So that was the peak. That was the spike. Even now, post-Ferguson, post-Freddie Gray, the crime, gun crime also, wasn't nearly as bad as it was in the 80s and the 90s, because people don't remember that stuff. I do. I'm an old guy, and I worked all that time.
Yeah.
But then murders started to peak in all the major cities. having been prosecuted. Those are individual sole incidents, and they were handled. Okay? But still, murders went up, and the massive impetus behind this was cops were listening to what they were told by so many people on so many levels. So when you have a disinterest by law enforcement in the community, because it's what they was, not only were they told, they were demanded to do this, then murders began to rise, crime began to rise. Again, nothing like the 90s levels, not even close to it. Even gun crime, not even close to it. Well, what you're going to see because of this, defunding the police, that movement is, and that's why I say, especially in Minneapolis, do it. Don't just talk about it, do it. You want a great experiment, capital G, capital E. Shut the hell up, do it, and let's really see what happens. Now, logical, clear-thinking individuals like you and I, we inherently intuit what will occur.
Yep.
But people that are stupid / young, which means all the cops, all the little woke babies, all the little white people, the woke child mob, they've never been through anything like that before, and as far as they're concerned, if it doesn't happen to them, it's never happened before.
True.
So with all this systemic racism in law enforcement, well, if you're going to make a statement, let's walk it all the way through. Baltimore stopped noticing crime after Freddie Gray's death. And after that, what occurred is a big wave of killings followed. And then it occurred all around the rest of the United States. More noticeable, of course, in urban areas. Now, when was your daughter killed?
2015, May 27th.
Okay. I rest my case. And moving on. So this is a big societal experiment. And when you're a law enforcement officer and you're told not to do your job, after a while you're going to not do your job.
Yeah.
Now, if you take away law enforcement from law enforcement personnel, then I can honestly say this is an experiment we've never experienced. But today, on the NYPD, imagine if you're a member of the NYPD today. What happened is that 600 arrests that occurred in the New York area, the DA decided there will be no prosecution. And what that ends up doing is opening up all officers for massive suits. Because you see, and I've seen this before, as an attorney, then you would have gone and done something similar to, well, you know, you've foregone any criminal complaint against my client. So that tells me you don't have any confidence in the original fresh arrest itself. Therefore, I'm going to come back on behalf of my attorney and sue either the individual or the department for false arrest, because if you thought it was a good arrest, you would have kept him. You didn't keep him, so it must mean it's not a good arrest, because you violated my client's rights.
Yep.
So all of those arrests, if I were a good attorney, and I'm sure there's a number of them out there, drooling, foaming, just waiting, the DA drops the charges. So if you're an NYPD officer, you have to ask yourself, wait a minute, if we don't file charges for crimes, what's the point of being a cop?
Yeah.
The cops are definitely asking themselves that right now. But it goes two ways, and it's like a pool in which you throw a rock, and the rock sinks to the bottom of the pool, and there are all these concentric rings that begin to expand from that impact of the rock into the water. And the immediate ring, the immediate impact is with the cops. And then it goes to the DAs. Well, if we don't need cops, then we sure as hell don't need DAs.
Yeah.
Well, if we don't need DAs, what do we really need judges for? If we don't really need judges, then what do we need courts for? If we don't need courts, then what do we need probation for? If we don't need courts or
Yeah.
It's the argument that's going to be made by leftists. All of those things are going to be said. Prepare for that, and it's all lining up in the leftist ideal purple planet utopia of, once we get rid of cops, we can get rid of those pesky DAs. Then we can get rid of judges. Then we can get rid of probation, because that's inherently unfair. We can get rid of parole. And then ideally, we can get rid of the idea of incarceration itself, because really, when you think about it, people shouldn't be incarcerated. Well, that's certainly exhibited, don't you think, Ken, by the people that are saying that, well, especially under COVID, because this is going to be a thing, once COVID dies, and it will die, it will go away, then all these no bail, the institution of no bail and letting people go, well, folks, you don't really think that's going to change, do you?
No.
Do you think there's going to be any kind of a massive impetus on behalf of the various leftist DAs or the judges or the courts? They're not going to have the guts cojones to say something similar to, well, let's go back to bail. Well, except for the $1 million bail for the guy in the blue suit from Minneapolis. We'll hold him. Oh, and we'll hold those evil bastards that didn't believe in Wuhan 19. We'll hold them. But for people that are aligned with our leftist ideals, we won't be holding them. So this is a trend that's coming. If I can find it before I get to your question.
Yeah.
I have a quote, and I noticed this is from a guy who calls himself a social philosopher, a social professor. Guy's name is, because folks, if you don't think so, if you think we are even remotely balkanized right now in the United States, oh, you haven't seen a fraction of what's coming. Because to me, this paragraph that I'm going to read to you encapsulates where we're going until it's stopped. And I don't know that we have the wherewithal to stop this. But there's a guy called Khalil Muhammad. Please note that name for future reference. You're going to see this guy again. Because this, in terms of what he says, this now passes for deep discussion of policing today. This is a direct quote I am reading from him. The idea that police officers should prevent crime in black communities rather than simply policing the borders of black communities is what gave us stop and frisk, which actually is not just from the 1990s or inspired by broken windows policing, but versions of it were playing out very officially in the 1960s. Well, let's unpack that. And comes a time when you're going to have to really take people at their word. And this guy's word is, police officers should not prevent crime in black communities, only on the periphery of black communities. Let's do what BZ calls the logical extension. There will be a push very shortly to make sure that police don't enter into black communities. They may be given permission to police within a certain degree on the periphery of black communities. But the trend will be, and this is part and parcel probably of changing the entire paradigm of policing, is we'll let the black community police itself.
Mm-hmm.
Now, doing the logical extension, that will then become true for Asian communities. That will be true for Mexican communities. And what else will it be true for, Ken?
White
Muslim
communities.
That's correct.
Yep.
And that's a perfect time area because Islam is like a coiled rattler. It bides its time until the perfect strike.
Yep.
So Islam watches as the rest of the United States eats itself alive and decides, starting in Michigan, and certainly portions of Minneapolis, a bulk of which is Somali, isn't that the perfect time to start our own Sharia police? They've been talking about it for quite some time. There are even vehicles in New York painted similar to Sharia police or something like that look very, very similar to NYPD cars.
Mm-hmm.
So this is a perfect opportunity for an officer, call him what you will, put a knee on a black man by the name of George Floyd, and riots lit across the nation. The same department, Minneapolis, had a Somali officer shoot and kill a white unarmed female, and nothing happened in 2017. If you remember. Well, there weren't any riots for that. So, the Talking Heads, David Byrne was a writer and a singer for that group. They had a song whose words go similar to, "Watch out, you might get what you're after." And at this point, I'm of the opinion, honestly, let's have this honest discussion. This is what you want, so let's enable them. I don't live in Minneapolis, and I don't care. These are the people that you voted in, folks. You voted these people in D.C. You voted these people in Los Angeles. You voted them in Portland, in Seattle, San Francisco, and every leftist enclave. And so all you dipshits who invited all these folks in and then provided them with power by voting for them, you're going to have to live with this crap. And we haven't learned. We didn't learn from 65. We didn't learn from 68. We didn't learn from 92. We didn't learn from 2015. And we're not going to learn from 2020. So this great experiment, I say, bring it on.
Wow.
You first.
Wow.
Let's see what really happens. Because the odd thing is, all of these major areas that want to defund the police are also the areas of the fewest, the slightest, the most minuscule ownership of firearms. These are proscribed tools in these areas.
Yeah.
So, if the police have a disinterest in your safety, and government has a disinterest in your safety, and government won't allow you to defend yourself, and certainly there have been police chiefs who have made open statements within the past week saying, I will no longer place my officers in harm's way for property, when the original oath that I took in the 60s was to protect life and property.
Yep.
Well, we're already not interested in property. But, Ken, what do we know about property? What's the ultimate goal with property in the United States? Well, with socialism, things should be run by the government.
Mm-hmm.
If you go to communism, there really is no such thing as property. In a communist paradigm, there's no such thing as personal ownership of property. So really, all of these things dovetail together in terms of a perfect storm for forcing leftist goals, philosophies, and ideas upon a people, mostly the likes of which are absolutely unprepared to accept these things, except for a select few. And it's the select few that are making you kneel and lick the boots, literally, to prostrate yourself in front of those, the crowd, the mob, are demanding you kneel before them, like a chief did 2 days ago, to lay himself out at the feet of BLM and other white gaups.
Wow.
And this is the new America. So what's going to happen is we're going to have a cataclysm. We're going to have a massive paroxysm of insanity for a while before the ship gets centered. The ship is taking on water. The compartments are flooding. We're beginning the ballast is beginning to shift. We are now 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe 10 degrees off plumb. We're moving not to starboard, but we're moving to port. We're beginning to list to port. The ship of state is not in a good way right now. This all started in 2016 with OMB and all the forces that were arrayed against OMB, and is now culminating in, let's see, you couldn't kill him with Mueller, you couldn't kill when we have massive riots, calls to defund the police, the only thing truly left, and this is a ha-ha meme, is, well, Yellowstone's going to explode, or an asteroid is going to strike the United States square in the middle of the flyover states, because what could be better than that?
Exactly.
This is a war, folks. This is a war.
I want to...
A soft go against the president, and against the president, that means you and me. And, oh, by the way, that also includes every conservative. I don't care what your paint job is, every conservative, you're under fire, and they'd rather see you dead.
Exactly. I just want to concur with you on that, and thank you so much for coming on. But Kevin Moore out of Washington, D.C. responded to a meme I had out earlier, or a story I had out about the 15 people that died in protests and riots following George Floyd's death. And he stated, after 401 years of asking, what do you expect? Tactics and intensity are changing, and you can expect more casualties on both sides. Kevin Moore and the left believe that they are at war. The unfortunate thing is that we on the right are waiting for a war. The sad thing is, by the time we get our boots on, we may be outdone. And then what happens? We are at war.
The problem with that all is that Caucasoids live in fear. We know historically the Republicans have lived in fear. The Republicans really don't know, and it's been proven time and again, that they don't know what to do with power when they get it.
Yep.
We kept and held the White House and the House and the Senate under Bush for a while, and then all of that imploded. We had the power. The Republicans couldn't even decide amongst themselves what to do with it. So we know that even if they get into power, they're going to squander it away, except for OMB, who has a really damn good idea what to do with power. So, literally, this is a war. There's an old political axiom that says, meet words with words, and meet actions with actions.
Yeah.
Except for there are some marked exceptions to this. Altogether, too many Republicans are unwilling to meet action with action. The other thing is, I find this a very interesting and insightful examination. We talked about education having already been infiltrated by the left. One of the reasons that there's such a focus of hate on law enforcement is that it does not yet belong to the left. What we've seen earlier this year, and certainly now in the past couple of weeks, is we know already that our military has been infiltrated by the left.
Yes.
The various statements that have been made of military individuals who apparently are clearly unwilling to protect our governments. I find that incredibly disappointing. But now, folks, you must understand that's one of the reasons that law enforcement is under the gun. Leftists mostly have the military. Let me put it this way. The military establishment administrative portion. And they have a good percentile of law enforcement administration. But their grip on law enforcement is not tight enough yet. They're working on it. Trust me.
Yeah.
They're working on it.
Someday, the USSSA will rise. Ladies and gentlemen, Biff Zeppe, SHR Media, BZ's Berserk Bobcat Saloon. You can listen to him tomorrow night at 11 p.m. Eastern Time. We love you, brother. Thank you so much for coming on.
God bless. Take care. Be safe. I have no idea really where this is going. I wish I could say that I was absolutely assured that the boat will stop taking water and we'll be able to pump it out. One thing, I'll ask you this question.
Yeah.
One thing that I'm fairly convinced about now, even despite all this, is I do believe that Trump is going to be a second-term president.
Yes.
Any thoughts on what you think is happening in November?
I'm going to tell you right now, I believe that Donald Trump is going to win, and he's going to win bombastically. The problem is that you have a weepy, whiny Senate and a House that's very fragile. We could win the House and possibly lose control of the Senate. Now, what would be wise for every single person who's listening tonight and watching tonight is that you find the most conservative individual you can and run them in every election that you possibly can and face off. Because literally all that's left in America at this point, after Donald Trump, after his 4 years, the only thing that will be left is a battle between the United States of America and the United Socialist States of America. That's how close we are. And once we have lost, you do not return back from socialism. It takes hundreds of years to change back. Tyranny is a tough thing, kind of like cocaine. It's a real tough thing to get rid of. Thanks, BZ.
Thank you, sir. God bless you.
God bless you. There we go. Sir Mark the Bloviating Zeppelin.